You can kick us off, Luke.
Got it. Fantastic. Well, thank you everybody for being here today. This is the kickoff of the fall season of the Leader and Community Masterclasses. We're really seeking to help our current clients, but also just anyone in the community with tools and knowledge and wisdom on how they can better succeed in this crazy CPG place we all decided to play in. Today we have Steve Beckman, who I've been working with for a number of years. I've heard about him for even longer. I consider him one of the best and brightest in terms of packaging design and thought leadership in that space, and certainly even the execution. We have had a number of our brands work with him, and I just have been so impressed with every piece of work that Steve has done has been like, wow, that's amazing. And also very impressed because it's I've worked with some packaging companies for some other brands where we've spent over $100,000 doing a packaging design, and Steve, I can tell you, is much more efficient. And today he's going to be sharing I guess some of with us some of like how to look at that leadership relative to packaging design, and to give me some real examples. And ideally, at the end of his presentation, we'll be talking about your questions, but also if any of you have your packaging that you want to share and have ready to share on the screen with us, so we'd be happy to kind of talk about it live and have put Steve on the spot. Steve likes that, right, Steve?
Yeah, I love it. So does Casey too. Feel free to direct some of your questions to Casey.
We'll bring it on. So again, thank you for being here, guys. I'm gonna hand it over to Steve for, I think you've become a short presentation deck, and then we're leaving most of the time available for kind of a real hands-on and even like workshop type approach to this time together today.
Yeah, well, thanks, Luke. I hope I live up to that. If you know, Noah, I hope you weren't like, hey, I disagree. Guy sucks. I'm working with him now. Really having trouble. So you know, hopefully we do our best. That's what I'll say. Designology really works hard to try and make sure that everybody that works with us gets our A treatment. We're kind of a unique agency model. Casey and I started Designology about 5 years ago when we departed from a large agency company, global agency that owned us. We were kind of a niche studio within their network. And they determined that larger and more centralized was really the way to go. And that was the agency of the future, was a large corporate centralized, you know, let's headquarter in Chicago, let's have Dallas and LA and New York City, and everybody will be exactly the same. They'll work the same. We'll have the same centralized billing processes, same hourly rate, same corporate structure. And that wasn't how we built our business. That wasn't what our clients wanted. That wasn't what made us successful. So we departed. We parted ways, and we opened up an independent shop. And Designology, since that time, has striven to be very low overhead. We are a completely distributed workforce. We have about half of our team on salary. The other half is independent contractors that we bring in and out on a project by project basis. We're working with people that we've worked with for decades in some cases. And in some cases, we are their top client as a freelancer, but we keep them as freelance so that when we don't need that person, they're specialized. These are the higher echelon of the talent world. When we don't need them, if we don't need that person on your project, you don't pay for them. You're not paying their salary. You're not paying for our brick and mortar. You're not paying to keep our lights on. So it was a business model that didn't jive with the large agency, but it works real well in this case. So that's who Designology is. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And by the way, just as a general rule, go ahead and interrupt. If you have a question, if you want to bring something up, I 100% do not mind interruptions. What we'd love to do is keep this really interactive. So we'll get through this as quickly as possible here to leave as much time for discussion. But you know, if you have a question that comes up along the way, don't take notes and then, you know, raise your hand later. Just interrupt. We'll stop. We'll discuss. I want to make this about what everybody feels is valuable. So I had to come up with a title. So this is it. Everyone's talking about user experience. About half of our business is in packaging and branding. The other half is the other side of the industry. We work with retailers, We work with companies that work with retailers. We're in the UX space. We've been in e-commerce ever since COVID. COVID changed the game for every retailer we worked with. So where we used to be able to kind of count on the way a brand would come to market and the way consumers would interact with it, it'd been the same way for a long time. COVID changed all that, and now the whole game has changed. So UX, UI is a big buzzword in the industry. Like I said, digital is about half of our business. But what's interesting is the rules that apply to the one are starting to apply to the other. And we'll get more into that in a little bit. So this is about how user experience is changing the way consumers interact with really brands and how each of you need to respond in light of that. So talked about Designology a little bit. We do focus on being consumer co-creation, which means we look at your consumer first and not your product first or your desires first. We want to know about the consumer because that's who we ultimately need to talk to. It isn't really about what I like in a brand or what Casey likes in a brand. It's not even what you like in a brand. It really is whether or not it resonates with them. So that's our guiding principle. We do a wide variety of things. You're going to get this presentation so you can read it later. Just a few quick snapshots of stuff we've done. This is our this is why we deserve to be here moment, I suppose. But we've done a lot of things. Really what we wanted to communicate in this and in the screens that come up next, we are about big brands and small brands. So we've got a lot of big brand experience. That's where it all started, but we've worked with a lot of smaller and more emerging and even private labels, so retail brands, own brands. We have a pretty wide mix. Some of our better success stories of late, this is the Field Day redesign. One of the coolest things about this redesign is how quickly it happened. When they came to us, they had almost no time whatsoever to get this ready. Casey, do you remember what show it was? Was it PLMA?
I wish I could remember.
Or Expo? It might have been Expo
One
West.
of the big ones.
Yeah. So they were like, it was late in the game. It was so late in the game that I'm not even going to tell you how fast we did this one because all of you are going to expect us to work that fast for you. And quite honestly, we don't want to work that fast anymore. But the agency we came from never would have been able to do it. And because of the way we structured this, I mean, everybody here gets buy-in into this stuff. Like we all do this because we want to do it. We have skin in the game. And so this was successful as a result. And it was successful in no time flat. And it was a lot of SKUs. The Sprouts redesign, this isn't even the best stuff from Sprouts. It just happens to be our before and after that we had handy. Almost everything that's on their shelves right now came through our team from a private brand standpoint. They've got a few new items that we didn't do, but the majority of the stuff still came through us. This is one of our more recent, and this is our chance to tout our V-driven friends. This was a V-driven client, and it was just a great client, great relationship all the way through this. Everybody was really into this one, and it was a great success. The repositioning of Kula was probably our favorite of last year. This is one of our all-time favorites, again, in terms of speed, and it was just a lot of fun to work with, but this was a brand new product. When they came to us, they had an opportunity at Walmart, but they had to be on shelf in 10 months. And they had 3 names to start with. That's all they had. And so we started with consumer research to just figure out which of these names they should use and then work from there and got them on shelf, and it was a lot of fun. So that's who we are. Let's talk about what we're actually here to talk about. So this is a fun fact here that everybody kind of understands. We get this now. User experience drives shopping decisions. The vast majority of our retail shopping trips now begin with this. We start on our phones. So digital devices are our means of interacting with brands by and large. And even when we go in store, the shopper journey almost always includes that digital device. So user experience helps drive our shopping decisions. The interesting thing is, until very recently, nobody thought about packaging that way. So e-commerce platforms, app developers, they tailor everything they do to the consumer and to the way they want the consumer to interact with their product, with their tool. And from a packaging standpoint, that's exactly how we need to look at it. how do we want the consumer to interact with the brand? Consumers are driving everything right now. Consumers drive everything. And if they're not influencing your decisions as you build your brand, if they're not influencing our decisions as we help build your brands, then we're doing something wrong. So that's our guiding principle for this workshop today. Just real quick, principles of good user experience. We narrow it down to 5 things. Is it useful? Is it navigable? Is it desirable? Is it credible? And then there's this term called heuristics, that if you're not in the digital space, if you're not in UX, UI, you've probably never heard that before. But what that translates into is a natural, intuitive design to the tool. Well, if you think about packaging, the packaging that likely resonates most with you are the brands that feel very natural when you look at them. Things aren't popping out all over the place. They just sort of work together to present one interface. That package is one singular entity that's helping us interact with that brand. So all of these principles that we use when we develop websites, when we work on e-commerce platforms, and these are what we use to develop consumer testing tools, they also work well as guiding principles for design. So we distilled that down into 5 steps that every brand owner needs to be taking right now. This is our recommendation for where to go from here. If we were pressed on it and you said, what's the most important of all of these? It's 5 things. We really tried to, I had in my mind, it was 3. We had to come down to 3. Couldn't come up with 3. So we're going to work through these. And then my suspicion is that one or another of them kind of resonates with each of you, kind of where you're at in the process. It really depends on where you're at. So the first one is know your landscape. This is very early on. This is before we get anywhere near the what decision do I need to make on my packaging design? What should I, what claims should I make on the front of my package? This is about white space. And it's interesting. See, 2022 was bad in a lot of ways in the retail landscape. It was very challenging. But because it was challenging doesn't 100% mean that everything that happened was bad. Opportunities arise in these times. Now, if I'm a huge, iconic national brand, I'm a little worried right now because of the landscape. Consumer trust in big brands is at an all-time low. And so if you look at these spending intentions that were measured here, in groceries, look at the green section of groceries. That's the spend more category. That's the top section here. So where takeout and delivery, I know these are probably small, takeout and delivery, the next one is dining out, then out-of-home entertainment. Those are all declining. The yellow portion is I'm planning to spend less in the future. On groceries, they already plan to spend more. We're increasing our spend in grocery, and it's not all because of inflation either. As times get tough, people go to the grocery store for their special occasions instead of going out to the restaurant. Cooking at home is at an all-time high, which means ingredient purchases are at an all-time high. So if I'm bringing a product that helps the home chef prepare a better meal for their family, if I'm bringing that to market, now is prime time for me. So just because it's hard times in a lot of places doesn't mean that there isn't an opportunity for me and my brand. If you look at those stats to the right, it's interesting. 78% of consumers say that a sustainable lifestyle is important to them. Now look how that plays out. 61% agree that environmental issues have impacted their current and future health. So we 78% say that sustainability is important. 61%, for those 61%, it's actually to the point of I can tell that it's impacted my health. But look at the bottom number. Only 31% are likely to buy products with sustainable credentials. You would think if 61% of the surveyed shoppers felt that sustainability was important and environmental issues are having an adverse reaction, why only 30% likely to buy products with sustainable credentials? Well, you go back a few years and sustainability was the big buzzword. It was also expensive. And I remember sitting in meetings, even at these big brands, where these printers would come in touting sustainable packaging, sustainable inks, plant-based inks, and the brands would look at them like they had 3 heads because it cost about 3 times as much. It didn't look as good. And it created this friction in their manufacturing process. Well, now all of a sudden, there's better technology out there. We know a lot more about the why behind it, and it's become much more important as a result. So that 31% feels a little low, but 2 years ago, it was probably about 13%. So it's rising. So if we're not paying attention to sustainability and things like regenerative organics, for example, if you're regenerative, Sprouts and Whole Foods are listening to you right off the bat. That's growing. That's a new trend, and it's going to only increase. So this whole sustainability thing, there's environmental issues going on out there, but it's opening the door for products that address them. So all to say that now is the time. If I'm a scrappy emerging brand, now is my time. So my guess is that everybody that's on this call today is somewhere invested in this place where we're looking at our brands and our opportunities in a new way. The second step, knowing your audience. And this was a phrase that Casey came up with as we were batting this around. I think it's brilliant. You need to understand your consumer and speak only to them. We're talking to an audience of one now, and that came in the digital space. App developers know that they're always, and retail e-commerce platforms, they're always talking to the space of one at their best. When they're at their best, they're treating you as if you're their only consumer. And so as a packaging person, as somebody who's invested in consumer product packaging, for years and years, we've looked at that and said, nah, that's not how we can't do that because, 100,000 and up press runs and everything else. We just can't look at it that way. We've got to work for the general population. Well, Gen Pop is dead. From a research perspective, almost nobody comes to us anymore and says, my audience is Gen Pop. Or my audience, my favorite term, the primary grocery shopper. Who's your ideal consumer? Well, the primary grocery shopper. What you're basically saying at that point is anybody that's willing to spend money on my product is my primary shopper. But that's not your consumer target. Your consumer target is the person for whom you, as a brand owner, or you as a brand, just associating you with your brand, your target is the person for whom you are irreplaceable. It's kind of the difference. Back in the day, we used to use the Ford Taurus as the example. And I know Ford Taurus hasn't been around. I'm totally dating myself. So if your hair isn't gray, you probably don't even know what the Ford Taurus is anymore. But the Ford Taurus was like the car for everybody. And Ford thought it was great. They had it in their lineup for years and years. It was wonderful. Everybody was driving it. There's a ton of them on the road because the one thing Ford knew how to do was mass produce. The problem is nobody loved them. And so when cars like the Mini Cooper started coming out that were iconic, they were memorable, they were fun to drive, and what's even more important, they were polarizing. You either loved it or you hated it. So the people that loved the Mini, for those people, there was no substitute. That's the goal for your brand. You don't need to appeal to everybody, especially in this culture that we have today that is so, I mean, the consumer targets have gotten smaller and smaller and smaller and more diverse within them. You need to find your sweet spot and speak to them. Now, you're going to draw other people in because there are groups that listen to other groups in every study we do. But find your target and aim at them. Aim small, miss small. That's the way to go in today's market. The third step then, so you know your opportunity, you found your white space. What is it that we're going to do? What's my opportunity? And we have a handle on who our consumer target is. Then it's knowing your brand. All of this, note, this all comes in before we start doing our part, before we start doing the design. Now, we can work with you through each one of these. But a lot of the heavy lifting on these, this is on you as a product owner. And in a large part, I would imagine, Luke, you guys get into this kind of thing as well, happen to kind of work through this, identify these opportunities. So I'm here today. I'm not even just selling our, what we do, looking for new clients out here. This is stuff that really gets around, are you going to be successful whether or not we do a good job? So knowing your brand, everybody talks about their brand promise, but this chart illustrates all the things that kind of underpin that brand promise, the things that we want to pay attention to as we build the brand. 3 pillars of the consumer, the brand itself, and then its identity. which we differentiate only up until we get to the emotional essence of the brand itself. We differentiate them so that we can look at what builds them. So we're going to go from that strategic consumer target, build up to that universal human truth that is going to inspire more than just my specific target. So that universal human truth can be the thing that's the same among these diverse groups that we're going to pull in, but it begins with our strategic target. We've got to have a reason to believe that then builds up into these higher level benefits. See how it starts at the specific and gets larger. And starting with that specific brand character and then building up into this core belief that kind of drives the brand identity. We wrap that all around the brand promise, which is what your brand says, and the emotional essence, which is kind of what the consumer takes from it. We sometimes call that the consumer takeaway. What's the one thing that you want the consumer to remember about you after they first interact with your brand? What's the first thing that you say to them? So that all goes into knowing who we are as a brand. And when Casey and I and the design team are kind of discussing these brand essences, we try to personify them. Because if we can't make the brand an individual, if we can't make that brand speak like a human being, then we've probably missed something along the way. The brand has to have an identity, a personality, a way of interacting with the world. And if you can't think that way about your brand, you've missed a step along the way, and you need to circle back around and make sure that you're on the right track, because these are the things that today's consumers are paying attention to. Sasha, the 3 questions. They had to make it in here. So when you get your opportunity, you have to capitalize on it. You've got to make it count. So you've got that magic moment. We've got your consumer. We've got them in front of your brand. You've done your homework. You're in that white space, right? You're in the right place in your industry. You know who your brand is and how it talks. Now we come to the 3 seconds where you're either going to win the battle or lose it, 3 seconds or less. As we breeze through the aisle, or now in the digital age, as we first interact with your brand. And that can be on social media, that can be in an e-commerce platform, it can be on your website. If it's social media, it can be driven by your brand, or it can be user generated. McDonald's about 4 years ago had something like 7 different shopper journeys that they had identified and they were enabling through their technology and the way they communicate. That means 7 different paths the consumer took to get to that register and make their purchase. Today, that number is over 30. So consumers are coming at brands from a variety of different ways. They're starting in a variety of different places, but it's always the same question first. Do I notice it? As a consumer, do I notice your brand? So in a store setting, when I'm 10 plus feet away, what do I see about your brand? And chances are it's not much. I have to recognize it right away. It's got to catch my attention. It has to break through the noise. People talk all the time about standing out on shelf. This is where it comes in. It's not everything. I can take a product and make it hot pink and it'll stand out on shelf in almost every category in the store, but that doesn't mean it's the right way to play the ball. But you do have to break through the noise. So what's that first thing? Do I notice it? The second question, now I'm approaching it. I've noticed it. It's caught my attention. The question that comes up next is, do I understand it? Are you as the brand owner giving the consumer the right information to make their split-second buying choices that they're making as they approach it? Do I recognize what it is? Do I recognize what flavor it is? What's the benefit statement? Am I in the right area? Am I looking at the right product? So as they begin to interact with the brand, they're seeking some more information about it. Now we're getting into some of the smaller details. This is all happening like this. Do I notice it? Do I understand it? And then the final one, is it for me? We've always talked about the big challenge is to get the product into somebody's hands. And once it's in there, they're making that last split-second decision. Is it going to go into my cart or is it going back on the shelf? Now they're almost looking for a reason not to buy it. If you give them a reason not to buy it, it's going to go back on the shelf. So if you haven't fully communicated and articulated the right benefit statement, if you have benefits that you're touting that are true about your product, but they aren't the ones that resonate with them, the other things that are true about your brand might resonate with that consumer, but if you're not communicating them appropriately, your product's going back on shelf. They're looking for a product that's for them. And that's where user experience really has come in. Because if the app doesn't feel intuitive to me, if the store doesn't remember my preferences, if they aren't serving up the right type of products for me, I'm switching channels. So it works that same way in the packaging world. We've got to fine-tune everything we do to be customer-centric. And that requires a good understanding of your consumer, which means that step 5 is put it to the test. So this is an example of a testing platform that we've developed because over the years, we've been invested in gathering consumer intelligence. We've gotten it from all kinds of different sources. Consumer intelligence is expensive. Anybody that's ever invested in consumer testing knows how expensive this is to get good consumer intel. Well, it didn't seem that complicated to us. We've been doing it. We know people that have done it. We brought somebody on our team that was the head of consumer intelligence at Campbell's, and we built a platform. And so the goal for our platform was to unlock research at a much lower level, to empower brands that are emerging. And we're constantly on a quest, by the way, to get it cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and faster at the same time, because we want to empower emerging brands to be able to know something about their consumers. So evaluating our design options, evaluating product choices, evaluating claims, and putting it in context. So our tool puts them on a shelf. This is an example of a refrigerated case. We've got a dry case. We can do this in an e-commerce format, and we can do it in a store aisle where we're putting you in the midst of 80 or 100 plus other products. So whatever the right environment is, however you're going to sell your products, we've got a tool that works this way because we want to know when consumers get surrounded by not just your brand, but the competitors and marketplace noise around it in that context, are they going to interact with your product? If they don't, why not? If they do, why not? So our platform puts them in, gives them a shopping assignment, and then monitors them as they shop. We record everything they do. If they do pick up your product, we can ask a specific question afterwards. If they pick it up and don't buy it, we can trigger a different question. All of this is online, all of it's automated. If they buy it, we can trigger a specific question. If they buy other brands, specifically ones that you're targeting, we can ask specific questions to those. So we can get down to the very granular details of why they are and why they aren't interacting with your product and what it is that's resonating. If you haven't put, and I'm not just here selling us, there's other platforms that work for this. Find the one that works for you. But if you're not truly putting your thoughts, your intentions, your suppositions of the brand that you own to the test and finding some real data, we highly recommend finding a platform that'll do that. So those are the 5 things. Depending on where you're at, one or another might resonate. I wanted to give an example of a brand that really did all of this really well. Now, fair notice, it's not an emerging brand. Second, fair notice, we didn't design this. So we're not touting our work here, and we're not touting something that's in this space, but they did an excellent job of this. So we wanted to pick this up. It's also very topical. This redesign, I have one here. By the way, full disclosure, this is the first box of Kraft mac and cheese that I've bought in probably 10 years. So nobody in this room get on me about my unsustainability and unhealthiness and whatever else. But they're a good example of doing this the right way. So simplicity wins. Casey and I have been talking about this for a long time. This is the guiding principle behind what we do as a design agency. Guy named John Maeda, who coincidentally, Casey, I had to look it up because I had to remind myself of who John Maeda is. I've been quoting this so long, I forgot. Do you know who he works for now?
No, I don't.
Microsoft.
What?
The company so famous for complicated packaging hired a guy that wrote a book on simplicity. So if that's not a case against the big brands, I don't know what is.
Maybe
But John Maeda coined this phrase. He wrote a book on simplicity and wrote this law of simplicity that says simplicity means subtracting the obvious and adding the meaningful. What that means is if it doesn't need to be on your package, it shouldn't be. So there's the before and after, before to the left, after to the right. You can see how they stripped down and cleaned up their package for the new consumer. They completely re-engineered everything they did, far more iconic, right down to the name, by the way. The name of the product legally changed from macaroni and cheese to mac and cheese. What did they do? They leaned into what consumers were already saying about them. So really interesting, bold redesign. Everything we do in the digital space, we talk about friction, these places where I'm interacting with something that doesn't need to be there. It doesn't help me make a better decision. It slows me down. We call that friction. Well, there's a lot of friction on the package on the left. There's zero on the package on the right. They've engineered everything the right way. And that even...
Can I ask a quick question?
Yeah, go ahead. And unless it's, why didn't we do something like this for you?
No, because I know you will, so we're getting there. I was looking at the name change. So they're using lowercase letters, but then when you look at the H,
Yep.
it's capital. So like how would you think through something like this, like a process to like put like one letter capital when everything else looks lowercase?
Yeah, it's interesting. You've got a great eye, Noah. You really do have a great eye. So Casey would give you a far better answer, but I'll throw mine out there first, just because she swore to me up and down that if I put her on the spot, she would kill me. And I really don't want to die because I'm going to the beach tomorrow. Which, by the way, Casey, I'm taking tomorrow off.
Oh, okay. You deserve it. Okay.
When we do any kind of logo work, and I recognize that's not a logo, but it kind of falls under the same rules. You never want to throw just a typeface out there. And when you look at even just the letter forms that they're using, they're leaning into shapes that feel very much like their product itself, right? And it's got kind of that same personality to it. But by the same token, it can't just be letters. It can't just be what you would expect. You want something ownable about everything you do. So yeah, we found the right kind of typeface. We found a typeface that's leaning in the right kind of shapes. It's fun, it's approachable, but subtle things that we do to adapt them and make it look the right way, they make it just a little bit more unique. Now, if you look at that word cheese and you see how it kind of flows across there, it's kind of a solid block. Picture what it would be if it was lowercase h without that ascender on the right-hand side, and you create an empty space in the middle there with that. My supposition is that that was their guiding reason for doing it, that it created a nice solid block. But at the same time, it also created something that kind of catches the eye and it's a little bit unique. Casey, other thoughts?
Totally agree. That's what I was just going to point out. That the hole that would be there.
Yeah.
Holes jump out at you.
Yeah, I feel like the font that they used in the new one is much more appealing to children too, right? Like,
Oh, 100%. Way more approachable.
yeah.
And I like their use of the different shades of the blue, like something that we were talking about too. Like that's really nice.
Yeah, I knew, you know what, when I threw this in here, I thought about you in the 7-Up example, and I knew this was going to come up. I knew you were going to see that.
You're predictable.
So we're on the right track then. That's good.
Yeah. Well, it's not that Noah is predictable. It's that he's consistent and it's very topical, because like this is a discussion that we're having right now.
No, I saw the 7-Up thing too. He sent it over to me. So
Yeah.
as well.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah,
And-
so there you
and-
go. He's consistent.
I do love that dripping cheese off of the piece of pasta under mac and cheese.
Yeah.
It just feels more tasty. That.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can see before they had it coming off the spoon, and it's lost
barely.
in there, right? It's so cluttered with the noise around it, and now they've isolated. They've made it part of the iconography of the brand. It's a win. This is one of the best brand redesigns that I've seen in probably the last decade.
Nice.
And when you put it in context, you start understanding how they're looking at this from an omni-channel perspective. They're not just thinking about their package on the shelf. So from the website, which again, websites are 100% under your control. If your website doesn't reflect your brand real well, shame on you, because that's 100% under your control. And I'm saying that knowing that as I'm pointing the one finger towards everybody here, 3 pointing back at me, we've been there where the Designology website lacked behind stuff that we were doing for others. We're all busy, so it's easy to let things fall behind. But every one of our digital touch points has to work together, especially today, especially in the omni-channel era. So their website, all of a sudden their language, everything they're leaning into, deluxify everything. So they're creating their own language around this brand. And when they use terminology like that, it connotes what they want in the brand. So now when I look at this package, when I look at that drip coming off of the product there, I understand, ooh, that's deluxe. I might not have thought that way until I interacted with it there. You look at how it works on social media. Look at that icon in the upper left of their Instagram profile there, how well that works and how different it would be without that little drip that Luke pulled out. So then put it in the context of things that aren't under their control, right? So how it works down there in an e-commerce position, how it works on the shelf. And by the way, interestingly enough, Velveeta redesigned their brand and nobody noticed it. I didn't notice it until I was looking at this redesign, and I had to track it back. That Velveeta redesign, that happened in 2021, Casey.
Oh, wow.
That happened 2 years before Kraft came out with this. Why didn't we notice it? Because they didn't do the same job. It's good. It was a good step, but actually, if you look back at the old design with their logo in the oval and some white behind it, it popped a lot more off the shelf. One of the things that we talk about that came out with the rise of UX UI development is an ADA compliance check. So Americans with Disability Act, websites have to pass ADA compliance in order to put any sort of legal info on them. So do back panels on packaging. Things like the nutrition facts have to be a certain level of contrast between what we're writing and the background behind it. Ironically, by the way, they fail. Knocking out white from yellow, while it works in a digital sense, if you look at it up there, it actually wouldn't pass an ADA compliance check. So they didn't get everything right. But Velveeta fails all across the board. Hardly anything has contrast on theirs. So this brand was crafted. Now, I wasn't in the meetings, but I can almost assure you this brand was crafted to work in an omni-channel space. They looked at every one of their digital touch points, and they designed it for usability. Interesting. How many of us have ever considered creating one package for shelf and one package, or at least an image of a package for e-commerce? But how little time does it take? Look at that actual package with all the noise on the front panel that the government forces us to put there. And look at it again with the simplicity of that e-commerce asset that's up on Walmart and Kroger and Target and everywhere this is being sold. Great move. They're not the only brand that's doing it, but they're doing it particularly well. If you look at the iconography in their logo, that's in the lower left there. Which one of those two looks more Instagram worthy to you? They brightened up their color palette. They made it much simpler. It pops much more. Luke, as you said, that font is much more appropriate for their target consumer. See, they understood their target consumer and they're speaking only to them with this. Mm-hmm. And then the complexity versus simplicity example on the right-hand side, typical back panel. Now, that's a Walmart back panel. You see the Walmart logo on there. That's not the former back panel for Kraft Mac and Cheese, because they got it right even in the last iteration of the brand. But there are brands that are lagging behind. So we've got this huge billboard on the back panel, this great space, and everybody's afraid to strip important information, except Kraft. They crammed everything you need to know about the nutritional content of their product into a 1-inch by 7-inch side panel. They put their user instructions on the other side panel. And thanks to iconography and great copywriting, they made it simple enough to follow. But who really needs instructions to make Kraft macaroni and cheese?
Good point.
Right? So they left this entire, they cleaned up this area and left this entire billboard for what I would call Instagram copy. That's not even romance. The way they crafted this thing, they absolutely 100% crafted this for an Instagram capture. 100%. They've got their website, a couple of pieces of copy, and a bold, iconic image. So kudos to them. It takes guts to do it that way. And a lot of us are so afraid of getting called out by the FDA or something that we don't want to take these risks with our packaging. Well, the good news is that there aren't policemen that walk through the aisles looking for non-compliant packages. If you're not intentionally trying to deceive the consumer And your competitors aren't going to turn you in for being blatantly false in your information. You're probably going to be okay in following the example of one of these major brands like this that understand I've got to resonate with my consumer. Yes, I have to be legal in disclosing the information about my product, but the number one thing I have to do is I got to connect with my consumer. Because I can put the most compliant package in the world on shelf, and if nobody gives a rat's butt about it, then it makes no difference to anybody, right? It's got to sell or it's irrelevant. So design it to sell, design it for usability, design it with your end user in mind. So just wanted to wrap it up. We're going to open this up. Hopefully I took an appropriate amount of time with this. I'll open it up for anybody to throw out whatever they want to talk about. But I want to leave it with some action items. Everybody loves action items. Here's what I can do. So we divided it into 2 parts. What can you do to shore up the foundation of your brand now? So this is kind of the action items for today. Basic blocking and tackling still wins football games. So there's basic things that if we're not doing them, we need to, and we need to do them right now. So the first one is complete an evaluation of your brand foundations. Ensure that you have the right positioning. It is never too late or never the wrong time to reposition your brand. Brands do it all the time. The ones we notice are the ones that wait too long to do it. Everybody noticed it when Pepsi came out with their latest redesign because they blew it up and started over because they had waited too long to do it. And I've heard people say, you know, it's interesting. Coke hasn't touched their brand in forever. Coke touches their brand about every 18 months. But what they're doing is micro movements. They're adjusting things to keep it relevant. And so nobody notices until you look at Coke today versus Coke in 2010 versus Coke in 2000 versus Coke in 1990. And then you see the chain of changes that have kept their brand relevant. It's never the wrong time to do it. Make sure you're hitting the right target. Ensure you know who they are and make sure it's specific enough. If you're talking to too broad of an audience, you're in trouble. So let's make it as specific as possible. And these are things that we help people do all the time. Embrace omnichannel. Your brand is going to be in every digital space imaginable. Make sure that it's going to speak consistently. Get out there ahead of the game with assets that can be used in digital channels, because if you don't define what you're going to look like in those channels, then you're leaving it up to them to define. You don't have a choice to be there or not to be there. You do have a choice of how you look like when you show up. And don't be afraid to break some rules. Again, this is a great example of it. Don't be afraid to go out there on a little bit of a limb. And I'm not telling anybody to be deceptive, nobody to say, hey, we're not going to put this on there at all, right? That's not the solution. We don't want to get product recalls in our chain of events, in our path to purchase here. But within reason, don't be afraid to break some rules. Go out on a little bit of a limb. Your consumers, unless you're talking to somebody radically different from who most brands are talking to, they're going to reward you for being a little bit edgy, unless your goal is to bring the Ford Taurus back to market. So for the future then, things you can do. Highly recommend investing in insights. It doesn't take $50,000 to build an insights plan. Okay, you can do this for $10,000 and below, and it's getting cheaper all the time. We're actively looking at ways to make our products more and more and more approachable for people that are, I get it, we're trying to scrap things together here. And that's why, by the way, I didn't put this in the things you should do today that everybody should do. I recognize it's an investment and I respect all of your challenges that you go through. Find a place in there. It doesn't have to be right now, but find a place to invest in some insights, to get to know how consumers actually interact with your brand when they're put in the context of marketplace noise. Make sure you're working with the right kind of partners. And that doesn't just mean Designology, by the way. If you're not working with somebody, however, for whom you feel like a big fish in a little pond, then you're working with the wrong players. Embrace things that matter to your consumers, but you have to be authentic about that sort of thing. So we don't take a product, like if Kraft Mac and Cheese came out, and I'm looking at an ingredient list, and I'm just going to take a rough guess that there's about 30 ingredients on here. I don't expect anyone to read them or be able to pronounce them or understand them. So if I'm Kraft Mac and Cheese and I came out with sustainable packaging, which by the way, this is, but I bet the package that's inside of here with the cheese sauce isn't. But if I started touting the sustainability of my packaging and then had this kind of ingredient deck, probably being disingenuous. So look for the things that matter to your consumers and be genuine about them. So if sustainability is important to you as a brand, make sure that you follow that through, even if it costs a little bit more money, because what we're hearing from consumers more and more and more is that they are willing to pay a little, within reason, more for a product that resonates with them as being invested in the same kind of causes they are. And the number one thing that we advise for small, scrappy, emerging brands, stay agile. The one thing, the one huge advantage that you have over the big brands, and we work with people on both sides of the table. So our top client from a client size is Hershey. Okay. Hershey spends a lot of time and a lot of money looking for ways to act like a smaller company. When small companies, when emerging brands, scrappy brands start talking to us about we want to act more like a big brand, really doesn't resonate with me. Really kind of drives me nuts when we take our one big advantage that we have. If you understood how much money the big players are spending right now to try and act like emerging brands, to try and act, they even invented a term for it. It's called intrapreneurial. They want to act like somebody who's scrappy with their budget, who's coming up with great ideas. They're spending tons of money to try and act like you. So act like you and get there first. Stay agile. That's the best advantage you have over those established competitors. And with that, I'll turn it over to all of you. I didn't get interrupted hardly at all in that. I'm a little bit disappointed. So hopefully,
No,
people
Steve,
saved up
let me
something for the end.
let me explain to you. Like there is so much there that I think I was learning, and I'm sure the rest of the group was, that we just wanted to absorb it. And now it gets real. Are you ready?
Yeah.
I had multiple brands that were messaging me during your presentation that were excited about maybe some workshopping. I'm thinking maybe
Good.
we do kind of like a quick 5-7 minutes per brand that kind of reached out to me, and then giving some initial feedback, and then we'll go on to the next one if that works for you, Steve.
Awesome. Totally works for me.
Okay, so awesome presentation. Now the fun begins. Chris, I think you had yours handy. Do you want to show us your pack? Chris's product really is something that Sasha and I, when I saw it, we fell in love with it. We cook it in our home and love it. And I think it's so iconic and unique what he's doing. So go ahead, Chris. Let's see what you're doing.
All right, I turned off my background image. Can you all hear me?
Yeah. And Sasha,
right,
can you pin him so he's larger? Okay.
Oh, there I am.
Now you're big.
All right,
Let's do this.
So what I have is my new product. I call it Bucket of Bread. It is a 100% recyclable bucket with a mix of certified organic flours, but everything you need is in the bucket. And you just add water and you'll end up with over a gallon of dough, about 4 pounds, ready to use for breads, pizzas, cinnamon buns, garlic knots, breadsticks, pretzels, bagels. And I have a white, a wheat, and a 7 grain. I'm getting ready to do a small change. Instead of just having everything in the bucket where it's loose to extend shelf life, I'm going to use 2 little bags, and then you're going to have a yeast packet that has my branding on it inside. So now it's more of a kit, and that'll extend the shelf life. But that's a change coming up within the next few months. But I'm in the process of going to do a redesign on the label. It's going to be similar, but there were some things I didn't like on this original bucket, like the all capital bucket letters. But I've got everything you need on the back for your instructions. Access to my website, veteran owned, 100% recyclable buckets. Bucketofbread.com is blasted all over it. I don't really know what else you'd like me to do other than show you what I've got here. So if you have questions, or Luke, if you wanted me to point something specific, please let me know.
Okay, we'll pause there. Steve, you can show up in curiosity. Anything you want to know?
Yeah. So if you had to nail down to the 2 or 3 things that you feel like are the most important out of all of that you showed in there, what is absolutely most important? Why are people, first of all, let me back it up. Why are people buying this?
Because I'm a nice guy. No, so in person, when I give my spiel, I really point out that I'm veteran owned. I also point out that at least 10% of any profits that I do make from this business adventure is going towards charities that are combating hunger and fighting food insecurity in America, and that you can also donate buckets directly into the food pantries. It's called the Hunger Task Force of La Crosse. That's the city that I'm in Wisconsin. But those are tax deductible, and I've established a good relationship with them. But the top 3 reasons why you as a user want to use it is it's easy, it's homemade, and there's no kneading, so no effort. It's probably the simplicity of the mechanics behind using it and its versatility.
Okay, so take your bucket, put it back up to the camera, spin it around so I can see the process where I'm making it. So if I want to use it, okay, right there, back that out a little bit. All right, so what you said there is it's easy, right?
Yep.
That doesn't look easy to me. That's the first thing that jumped out at me. That there's a lot of words in the instructions there. I would say, if you went to look at this and take a look at the number of words and the amount of iconography on there. So what can I take out? Where can I take words out, strip that out, and put some icons in? Icons are real easy to understand. So if you said in 8 words, shake the bucket and mix it, and you can do that with 2 pictures, one with the bucket and some lines and one with the bucket and a spoon, pictures win over words. So that would be number 1.
Okay.
The reasons that you were talking about being veteran owned, the food pantry donation, what was the other one? The first 3 things you said. You're veteran owned.
So I'm veteran owned, 10%
charitable donations, 10% or something like that, and then you can donate the bucket to a food pantry. So it's interesting to me, you named them first and then went to how easy it is and everything's in there and all of that. I actually like those first 3 things better than the last 3. There's a lot of ways to make bread that's easy out there. And the easiest thing to do is to just pick it up off the shelf, right? And take it home in a bag if I'm satisfied with that. But if I'm invested, if I'm cause oriented, and I suspect that a number of your consumers are, I want to know how strongly are those coming through in your package?
Not so much on the packaging.
Yeah.
That could definitely be an improvement.
So I would say lean into, find the things that are different about you and make sure you're bringing them out. If those things resonate in any way with your consumers, if you're getting feedback over social media or something that those things are important, man, bring them out, because that's a differentiator.
That is amazing. Chris, how do you feel?
About my product?
No, about this feedback.
Oh, this feedback. This is amazingly awesome. And it's something
feedback sucks, but my product's great, Luke.
No, I'm super happy to be able to talk to people smarter than me, because, this is a one-man show over here by myself. And I'm just trying to get past that where I pay for it out of pocket every month.
Oh, yeah.
Sustainable. And then I can afford the improvements that, and I'm like the next best thing since sliced bread.
Oh, there you go. See, there you go.
That's
See,
good.
where is that on there? Casey, did you have anything to add to that? I spent the whole time.
No, you were spot on. There might be some tweaks I'd make to the design, but I think the design looks good. I would just tweak some things.
Okay, fantastic. We have a lot more people to go through. Chris, thank you for going first. Sherry, I think you had something you wanted to talk to the group about or share with Steve.
Perfect. Yeah, Sherry Hedges, and I'm a consultant, and I'm working with a small plant-based company out of Los Angeles. And they're going through a reiteration where they used to sell everything in glass jars, but due to breakage through distribution and high costs, we've moved to a more friendly packaging for retail and distribution, and that is called Cloud Cheese from Monty's.
Cool
And
name.
this is the new packaging. They're only have 3 ingredients, and they also have an original plant-based butter, a cultured butter, and then we have three flavors. Oops, sorry about that. Of cream cheese.
Okay.
So those are the items that that's the original. Then we have rose. This is scallion, and then truffle.
Wonderful.
Sorry, they're frozen right now.
Yeah, that's all right.
So that's where we're at. We're constantly looking at, what's next. My recommendation to her is making sure that the Monty's logo is bigger than she wanted to make it cloud butter and make it a name, but I feel like her brand has gotten lost in the packaging.
Yeah, I can't read that brand at all.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I would say, well, did you have a specific question coming out of that?
Any advice that you see just as it goes on the shelf, but also, as we continue to transition out of glass into a paper, or the other one is, this is a new packaging that you don't typically see cream cheese in. Any thoughts or advice?
Yeah, so number one, just getting back to what I was referencing before about how UX has kind of influenced it, I would take a look at my contrast on those packages. There were some things that as you were holding it up, I couldn't really read everything that was going on there. And I recognize that we're over a camera here. I'm not in front of it on the store shelf. I agree with you 100% on that logo. It's getting completely lost in there. So if you're going to put a logo on there, it's interesting. Kraft is real minimal on here, right? But everybody knows who Kraft is. But even though it's minimized, I can read it, right? And so I know what it is. If there's not something iconic about the shape, so they have it in a circle there, and there's nothing real iconic about a circle, then make it readable, right? Would be my advice. Make it ownable, make it legible. It doesn't have to be the largest thing on there. But I agree with you. I think that should be a little larger. Now hold those little tubs up again, one of those tubs. So the other thing is, depending on what kind of shelf this is sitting on, I'd be concerned that some of that stuff is getting cut off by lip of the shelf. That's really riding pretty low.
Okay, yeah.
So I would take a look at kind of that architecture there and just see it in context. What's written around the top of the lid?
So it's a repeat of the ingredients.
Great. I was going to say, somewhere on there, if you have 3 ingredients, that needs to be pretty prominent.
Yeah.
The number of ingredients, if you can get it below 5, I would sing that I would make that larger than the logo almost.
Okay.
Because that, to me, that's important. I would take a look at that and see what I could do to make that as prominent as possible. Casey, other thoughts?
Yeah, the one thing I'm wondering is, if cloud butter being so large, does that resonate with consumers? Should it be the largest thing?
Do they understand that, right?
Right.
Yeah. Yes.
Is there a feeling one way or the other? So we're non-GMO project verified, but the ingredients are almost 100% organic. Do you feel that one of those is more important than the other?
Well, that's a tough question, because I know, first of all, the non-GMO project people are thugs and really expensive. So like I half the time feel like I'd like everybody in the industry to just kind of get rid of that. And obviously, if it's certified organic, then we know it's not GMO, but does everybody? So I don't know. That's a tough call. It really is. And that's where I constantly go back to, let's talk to some consumers and see, even if you can get them to do, I love pop-up research. So a sampling in a store, something like that, where they're just talking to, even if it's at a farmer's market,
Yes.
any place where they can get in front of their consumers and just find out what's the most important to them. I would side with the consumer on that. I really feel for people that have to pay extra to get those certifications, because I feel like they shouldn't be necessary, but we all play ball in the same ballpark. So
I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheree. Thank you, Steve. That was it's amazing, and thank you for being willing to put on the spot here with immediate feedback. And really appreciate it. I think Dan, our friend where it's 8 p.m. over in Europe, I had a quick question for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So my name is Dan. I have a Mediterranean brand in olive oil, balsamic vinegar, and salt. I don't know if you guys are aware if you buy olive oil at all, but there's a huge crisis going on in olive oil. So the harvest in Spain has big problems last winter. So what happened is that they only were able to produce a third of what they normally do, and this is impacting all the pricing globally. And of course, that's the product itself, but then there's packaging. This is my packaging. I hope you can see it. It's a crisp white bottle. I'm not necessarily asking a question right now about this packaging, but I'm very interested to learn from you, Steve. What is your opinion on the impact of changing the type of packaging? Because this is actually a consideration of ours now that all the pricing in olive oil is going up. Because this type of packaging is it used to be half of our cost of goods sold. Now this is the only way we can influence the price on the shelf. We have pretty advanced, innovative ideas about this. As you might know, in olive oil, in premium olive oil, everything is in glass currently. So a consideration of ours is to go wild and pick a type of packaging that is very common in another category. What is your opinion on a type of move like that?
Well, I wouldn't be afraid to consider it. I mean, I think it's great to differentiate with our packaging. By the way, hold your package up again. It's fantastic. I mean, it's so iconic and so bold. This is what I'm talking about. Don't be afraid to be non-traditional. Don't be afraid to take some risks with your packaging. Anytime you strip it down, I mean, that is the very essence of simplicity right there. Now, I don't know whether it's good simplicity or bad simplicity. Only your consumers get to determine that. But kudos for going after it. I love that.
Thank you.
We all love the idea of having some type of iconic, recognizable packaging, the right type of structure. People talk to us all the time about structural design. Do you do structure with packaging? And we have people we work with that do that kind of thing. The bottom line is, it's interesting how often we've been asked the question, how few times people have actually used it, because structural development from an innovation standpoint is very expensive, like you're getting at there. The right type of package, when you develop a structure that pushes your competitors away because of your shape or differentiates by being just this iconic shape. I mean, there's never again going to be a package as iconic as that Coke bottle, where the very shape of the bottle defines the brand essence. I mean, they got it right and they got there first, and it's going to stand forever. But that's the gold standard. And everybody wants that type of thing where my package has to be totally unique. But we're in a new reality today, right? Pricing pressures. So you've got two things working again. You've got economic pressures in terms of inflation and that type of thing that are driving the consumers nuts. You've also got a supply chain issue that you're dealing with. So now you've got a double whammy there. I wouldn't be afraid to look at something else that consumers, they get iconography, they get being iconic with your design and being differentiated and all that, and they'll reward you for it up to a point. When that differentiation begins to cost extra to get into your product, it's really not delivering a benefit to them. It'd be one thing if you developed a package that dosed out just the right amount of some product where dosage was critical, right? Or if it's something that made it easier to use the product, or something where it made it more ergonomic to hold or to open or something like that. If it has some kind of higher level benefit to the shape or the texture or the just overall structure of the package, that's one thing. If it's purely aesthetics and differentiation, I wouldn't be afraid to backpedal on that a little bit, walk it back and give something back to your consumers. They'll reward you in loyalty, especially if you've already got them in your camp and you show them. And I would get out ahead of it, by the way. I would talk about it. We're changing our packaging. Here's why. We understand the challenges you're going through. We actually have challenges of our own over top of those. So everybody in your company, I don't know how many people it is, but you're dealing with those economic pressures when you buy your own groceries and you've got them in manufacturing your product. I think you've got a great case study for, hey, we're trying to give something back here. So this is what we're doing. Bear with us. We'll be back in the other one as soon as we can, or we'll do something better.
Yeah. So to what extent can that be sustainability, that higher level, that higher benefit?
Right. Sustainability is great. It's and I think sustainable is key. I wouldn't want to backpedal sustainability if you've built your platform on it. I wouldn't go, into plastic or something that isn't recyclable. But if you have the opportunity,
thing currently is this is a heavy bottle, and all the Italians, Greeks, and Spanish producers, they ship it to the US. So it's half of it is the weight. It's glass. So that's crazy what we paid in transport costs to get it to the US.
Yeah, well, so I love standing on differentiation and brand iconography, but I wouldn't want to go out of business because of it.
No.
So, and the bottom line where I always go to is talk to your consumers, find out, don't be afraid to create a focus group out of 10, 20 consumers that buy your product, offer them the chance to speak into the brand, get their opinion. You'll find out. They'll tell you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
Sage advice. Thank you,
Appreciate
Steve.
it.
Thank you, Dan, for the question.
Thank you.
Sasha, I think you had a question that was messaged to you.
Yes, I got a question from Joshua. Actually, two questions. So the first one, how to best identify your consumer target while being on a fairly popular category, healthier snacks and chips?
So the easiest way that I would know is to put some research out there and see. It's interesting. I rail on Gen Pop with general population, like as in a cross section of all of the consumers. I rail on that all the time when we use it as a target, but it's useful to start honing in. So I would put a study out, a Gen Pop study. And this is why we created our tool to be able to walk through a shopping exercise, but we would watch who shops your product, who responds to it the most. And then we can segment that and figure out what category they're in. Now, if any kind of research firm would have some type of tool that would help do that. Aside from that, it's interesting. It's very challenging. If you're not getting demographics back at the point of sale, and very few people do, stores don't release that kind of data. Half the time they don't even have it. So if you don't have that available to you, the one thing I wouldn't do is I don't trust social media as a cross-section of your consumer group. So like who's following you on Instagram, if you have an Instagram channel, that's not representative of everybody that's buying your product. So that's the warning. So at that point, if you don't want to do your own research, then what you're doing is you want to find some sort of reputable research firm that publishes an annual study and breaks the category down for you. So they would start with overall grocery consumers and then break it down into people that shop that category. And like you say, it's a popular category. So that data should be out there somewhere. Now, that won't specify who shops your brand, but at least you'll be able to get a generalized demographic and psychographic target sociographics. There's different ways to look at it. That will give you a picture of who shops the category. So specific research that you can commission will find out who's shopping your brand. But you can also purchase research that's out there to find out who's shopping your category. So if you have no other tool than that, I would start there.
Right. Any follow-up, Sasha?
Yeah, Joshua, do you have any follow-up question or comments?
No, thank you. That's very useful. I do have a second question. I'll just read it real quickly. How would you select the most important benefits or attributes to highlight on your packaging whenever you're designing it for the first time, right? So if a certain products has several, let's call them benefits, X grams of protein, high fiber, gluten-free, whatever they are. How would you pick which ones are the best for your specific product and your specific target?
So we don't want to use the word guesswork, but it always sort of begins there. It always begins with some gut check time. We look at, unless you're a brand new product in a brand new category, we can look at the category, we can look at other products in the category and say, what are they saying? And if there's no consistency between them, then unfortunately it's guesswork. If there's consistency across the board, it's either because everybody's following the same leader or they're on to something. They've spent some money, they've done some research. If there's a big player in your category, somebody that's an established brand with some money behind them, then they've probably done some research. So you can be reasonably certain that they're talking about the right things. Now, there's two ways of looking at that. Either they're talking about the right things because that's the right things to talk about with their product, or they're talking about the right things because they've trained the consumer to look at them. So it's not necessarily the most important aspects of the product, but so you kind of start there. You want to fit in with the category. You don't want to not be saying important things. But to answer that question for real, it always comes down to testing. So what we would do is we start with guesswork, and we would start with a range of options. And there are different ways of running consumer testing. There's things called combine tests and other methods where they would throw a whole lot of potential claims out there. And we would run a test and we would find out what the hierarchy is. What do consumers respond to the most in there? We always want to kind of let the consumers rank the important things. All of them have to be true. All of them have to be, kind of resonating with your product. They have to be applicable. You don't want to go on the fence on anything. So it's almost sustainable. So I'm going to talk about it. Half my ingredients are organic. So let's push made with organic ingredients. Well, so you're giving them an opportunity to say something bad about the brand. Then, well, so they're talking about organics and half of them aren't. So we don't want to don't be edgy in that. But we come up with a list of everything that we can say about the brand, and then I like to let consumers make that decision. Casey, what do you think from a design standpoint? Anything different?
No, you covered it. That's where we start. You look at what the competition's doing, and then if you can do consumer research about it, that's what we do.
Yep.
Okay. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Sure.
Great question, Joshua. Glad you were here. Let's move on to Sita Remedies. Stan, are you still here? Let me see. You mentioned that you were.
I am still here. Yes.
I love it. And Stan, do you have any of your product handy in like the way it appears on shelf? If not, I believe Tess has a deck handy.
Yeah, or what about sharing the Amazon page? Would that be good?
I think that's okay. You want to share your screen and.
Yeah, let me get this over here. Thank you very much for doing this, Steve.
Sure.
So here's our carousel images.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is the enhanced brand content, if that's what you call it. I think that's it. You want me to rest on any place here? Stop?
I'm wondering if looking at the box that appears on shelf when it's at retail could be helpful.
So that's this box here.
Okay. So what's the question?
The question is, okay, there's a lot going on there. What areas would you focus on first as far as cleaning this up?
And I think a general critique is okay too. We had a meeting with a big retailer yesterday with this brand, and it's like, hey, what's your packaging iterating forward? And so just if anything that as a professional that sticks out to you, that would be really helpful.
Sure. Can you throw that back up on the screen so I can just.
I can also just do what everyone else is doing and hold this here.
Yeah, that's fine. So what's the 3 lines that are in small type under youthful skin?
unhealthy looking skin, dry, itchy skin, acne, and pimples, which are just the these are homeopathic, so it's a drug fact. So those are kind of off of the uses that are on the back.
Okay, so those are the conditions for which I might use this.
Yes.
Okay. And is there a positive way of phrasing those then, the effect that it might have on those higher level benefits? So that the cause is acne, a higher level benefit is cleaner, more youthful skin or clear complexion, something like that, right?
There is. I would say the homeopathic market is a little bit staid and risk averse. So the only company out there doing that is Bach, which is our closest competitor.
Okay.
Everyone else just keeps it to the materia medica, like claims that they think they can make.
Okay.
But
So
turn it into a positive would be good.
are they claims they think they can make and they're afraid not to say certain things, or are there actual legal precedents out there saying this is a bad thing, don't do this, that type of thing? Because I'm not as familiar with the laws regarding supplemental claims.
Yeah, I mean, it's homeopathy, which is grandfathered into the drug category in the 30s because like enough senators were still using it. So it's very nebulous, and it's kind of how far do you want to push it as a small brand that I don't think we're really at risk, but you're always, an inspector can show up and say, yeah, don't do that.
Right. And then the worst case scenario is you fix it in a future run, or are you facing recalls? Because those are two very different things.
I don't know. I don't think we'd be facing a recall.
Okay. So I always look at it in terms of what's the worst that can happen. And if the worst that can happen isn't all that bad, and other people, there's some type of precedent in there for doing it a certain way, then I would go in that direction. Like I can look at this and I can tell you 100% assurance, this is out of spec.
Mm-hmm.
We do these all day long at Designology, day in, day out. Sometimes there's people doing nothing but nutritional decks for like 4 days on end. And this is compressed type. That's out of spec. I bet you that we are 3 point sizes too small in some of it. And because of the type of printing, it's really blurring together. Half of it, I literally can't read. They're way out of spec. What's the worst that can happen? They can get audited and one of their competitors can complain about it, and they could face an inspector showing up and saying, okay, here's what you need to do to fix it. And in the future, it's got to go back here. That's probably the worst case scenario for them. So they went ahead and did it. And that's kind of where I side. Now, it's easy for me to say that. It's not my skin on the line, right? So I can't make legal claims for you or advice, but that's kind of where I lean from a risk perspective. Now, can you hold the package up again?
Sure.
So what I would say, we start all of our package design approaches with some type of audit where we look at it in context. It's one thing to look at it right there. It's another to look at it on shelf. So what we'd want to see is that as you look at that on shelf against your competitors, who's standing out? Where's the eye going? What looks the most compelling on there? And the homeopathic category, by and large, and I'm sorry if this is being offensive in any way, shape, or form, and I don't mean to be, but if I had to pick out a category in the store that is the furthest behind the times in terms of how to speak to a modern consumer, it's probably in the homeopathic.
Which might actually be speaking directly to their consumer. I think that's part of the updating the whole category is that's an interesting. I would say the Genexa, who's owned by Steven Spielberg's son, is probably doing the best.
Yeah, they're good. And I say that as somebody who shops the category. My wife is big into homeopathy. I mean, we will go homeopathic for days or weeks before we visit a doctor. So she's into all of the essential oils and all that kind of thing. She'd be a great target for your product for sure. So I know when I'm walking down that aisle, I mean, it's information overload. We call it featureitis when we're talking about websites. How many features can I build into this? Microsoft is famous for it, which again is so ironic that John Maeda works there and has worked there for years. you can't say everything on a principal display panel. So
Yep.
distill it down to the thing that's going to differentiate and resonate. And again, I always like to talk to consumers about it to make sure that we're walking down the right path. But simplification is kind of how we do everything. There's a lot of black type on your package that looks kind of pharmaceutical in terms of its layout. I would say, what can we do to make that feel more approachable? Black on white, black on yellow is even worse than black on white. Black on yellow is value connotation. So even just with that flower behind the black type, it's kind of a negative from a color theory standpoint. So I would try and warm that up. I would try and open it up. As you scroll down through that product detail page on your Amazon page, it's really very aesthetic, very well done. You've built some good content for that. I would try and see how to get some of that same kind of look and feel into your packaging. Make it a little bit more approachable, a little less clinical.
Great. Thank you very much.
Sure.
I've been wanting to do the more affirmative thing for years now. So you hit right on something I've been thinking about for a long time.
Oh, good.
Fantastic. Stan, thank you for the question. Again, Steve, I have learned so much today and about packaging and theory and application, and just on behalf of our community, want to thank you so much for taking the time and for, truly just letting us workshop brands live. I think there was so much that every one of the brand owners was able to get out of this time today.
Oh, I hope so. I hope it was valuable. That's great. We had a lot of fun preparing for it, and I tell you, the workshop part of it, this is a lot of fun. We don't get to do this very often, so. Kudos to everybody who brought their brands in, by the way. I mean, that takes guts to put your brand up in front of everybody and say, hey, let's pick it apart, but it's a great thing to do.
Totally. Thank you to our community for how they showed up today and for being willing to fully participate in this experience. You made it, I think we all got value from learning about each other's brands and how we can even show up better and sell more. So guys, thank you for being here. I'm going to close it up now. Sasha, any final words for the group?
Well, I really enjoyed this session. It was so informative and learned a lot. So thanks everyone for joining us, and excited to see you on our next classes. And maybe we'll do another one with Steve in a couple of months again, just to kind of refresh and see what are the new trends.
Yeah, happy to do it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
Hey, thanks a lot.
Take care.
Bye.